"Ma'am, this qualifies as an emergency entry." Patricia's voice rang out just before the key slid into the lock. From inside the bathroom, my wife's voice cracked. "Wait, what are you doing? I'm not dressed. Stop!" The door creaked open an inch, steam curling out around Patricia's polished shoes. I reached it in 3 strides. My hand hit the door flat, stopping it cold. Behind it, I could hear Ellen's breath stuttering, her voice no louder than the exhaust fan. "You've just violated a pregnant woman's privacy," I said, not shouting, just letting the words land. "And for your sake, I hope the board has deep insurance pockets." Patricia blinked, smiled, tight and fake. "Random safety inspection, per HOA guidelines. If anyone has ever violated your wife's, daughter's, or sister's privacy, and you swore to yourself it would never happen again, then hit subscribe now. This time, we're not backing down." "I know the guidelines," I said. "I helped write the city's inspection protocols after 2 fire fatalities. There's no world where this qualifies." She hesitated. I could feel her calculating the optics now. Too late. "I'm Daniel Reeves, retired municipal building safety inspector and husband to a woman who nearly miscarried last year from stress-induced hypertension." Ellen is 34 weeks along now. She was in that bathroom showering to calm her nausea after a rough night. She thought she had privacy. We moved to Cedar Glen Estates because it was quiet, safe, the kind of place Ellen's late father would have trusted. He built this porch swing himself back in '92. I refinished it the week we moved in, hands sanding where his once worked. That swing was supposed to rock our newborn to sleep. Instead, Ellen locked herself in that bathroom and tried to breathe through panic as a woman with a master key shoved the door open without knocking. "I'm filing you for non-compliance," Patricia snapped. "And obstruction." I let out a long breath. "You stepped into an occupied bathroom without permission or legal cause. That's not a policy violation. That's unlawful entry. Board authority allows for unannounced inspections of shared exterior property," I cut in. "Not my wife's body, not the air she's wrapped in when she's trying to shower without being watched." Behind me, I heard the shower shut off. No more steam, no more cover, just Ellen's silence. Drop a like if you've ever watched someone misuse power and thought, "Not this time." Subscribe if you want to see exactly how we take this apart, one legal bolt at a time. Patricia looked past me, maybe trying to catch a glimpse of the so-called hazard. There was none. The fan was code compliant, the walls mold-free. The only thing rotting was the HOA's understanding of boundaries. "Your behavior today is going on record," she said. "Good," I replied. "Because when this ends up in front of an insurance claims adjuster or a judge, I want every second documented, including the part where my wife begged you to stop." She stiffened. "That's not what happened. It's what the officer will hear when they arrive," I said. "And I have nothing but time." Patricia turned. Her heels cracked down the hallway like a gavel. The front door opened, then closed. I didn't move right away. My hand still pressed to the door frame, like if I let go too soon, the whole house might collapse. Ellen finally spoke, voice low. "Danny, did she see me?" "No," I said. I was faster than her key. She didn't answer. Just the soft rustle of a towel, the scrape of a drawer. She wasn't just shaken, she was humiliated. And I wasn't just angry, I was done. "Where are you watching from?" I'm asking everyone who knows how fast control can turn to harm. This wasn't just policy abuse, it was psychological violence against a woman, and trying to carry life into the world in peace. They thought I'd respond with a complaint letter. They didn't know I'd already filed 3 city code referrals and spoken to 2 risk consultants the moment those master keys got issued. The swing outside still creaked in the wind, Ellen's father's work holding steady. But today, this house changed. This wasn't just home, it was evidence, it was motive, it was ground I would not surrender. They just declared war on the wrong man's porch. I stood in the doorway long after Patricia's heels vanished down the walk. Inside, Ellen wrapped herself in a towel with trembling hands. She didn't say much, just kept staring at the bathroom door like it might open again. That silence hit harder than any threat the HOA could write on paper. She didn't cry. Ellen rarely did, but her hands were shaking when I handed her a glass of water. "She didn't even knock," she whispered. "She just came in." I didn't give her promises. I gave her a plan. Because in Cedar Glen Estates, promises didn't matter unless they came notarized and delivered by email. By noon, the HOA violation was taped to our door in a plastic sleeve like it was sacred scripture. Section 4.9, refusal of access to conduct emergency safety inspections is subject to fines of $150 per day. No mention of consent, no signature, no emergency. I walked down the cul-de-sac to see if we were the only ones. We weren't. Mrs. Henderson across the street had a pink slip too, for improper curtain lining visible from exterior view. 2 houses down, the Rivas family had been cited for unauthorized sandbox modification. Their toddler had spilled some sand beyond the HOA-approved border bricks. That's all it took. "I'm just tired," Mrs. Rivas said, not meeting my eyes. "We can't afford another fine." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about bathrooms or curtain linings. It was about control. Keep everyone scared. Keep them isola. Ted. Because fear is quiet. But outrage? Outrage speaks up. Drop a like if you've ever looked around your neighborhood and realized you weren't the only one being pushed around, and subscribe to follow how we turned that quiet into something loud enough to shake a board meeting. By afternoon, I was digging into the HOA charter, not the watered-down version they hand out with welcome packets, the full incorporation documents. They were public record. Most people just never looked, but I had time, and I had a reason. The swing outside creaked once, twice. Ellen sat on it, knees drawn up, one hand resting gently on her belly. "She won't come back in," I said, watching her from the porch. "You have my word." Ellen nodded but didn't speak. Her father had built this porch as a wedding gift to her mother. That swing was where she sat the day we found out we were expecting, where she read her first baby book, where she'd started to believe she could raise a child in peace. And now she flinched at shadows across frosted glass. Inside the house, I opened a fresh notebook. Names, violations, patterns. I wasn't just building a case, I was reading the shape of a system. Patricia didn't act alone. She acted because she believed no one would push back. And so far, no one had. But that was about to change. I knocked on Mr. Lowry's door, the quiet veteran who always waved but never talked much. He didn't open right away, but when he did, I held up the pink slip. "Bathroom entry," I said simply. "She used a master key. My wife was inside." His jaw tightened. "She tried the same last month, said something about a plumbing check. I told her to get a warrant. Got fined 3 days later for unregistered flagpole." "Want to compare notes?" I asked. He looked over his shoulder, then stepped out and shut the door behind him. That was the first turn. By evening, 5 houses had confirmed it. Fines issued within 72 hours of any verbal resistance. The language changed, the penalties didn't, and none of them had been voted on in a public session. That's where I knew Patricia had gone too far. Not just morally, legally. Because once you start inventing enforcement without recorded votes, you're no longer enforcing policy, you're creating liability, and liability has a price. I stood on the porch swing as the sun dipped behind the roofline, Ellen's hand slipping into mine. "We're not the only ones," I said. She nodded. "Then we don't fight like we are." That night, I made a plan to talk to someone on the inside, not to beg, not to reason, but to find the crack in their wall, and by morning I'd know exactly where to knock. The HOA's newsletter hit mailboxes at 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, just like it always did. Cream cardstock, green ink, smug little phrases like "Cedar Glen is only as strong as its rules." But this time the signature caught my eye. Mark Trent, HOA treasurer. Not Patricia, not the president, just Mark. I didn't know much about him except that he lived on the corner lot with the hydrangeas and always wore old Red Sox hats to meetings, like he didn't care about the dress code, but something told me Mark knew more than he let on. So I showed up with a plate of Ellen's banana muffins and a copy of the newsletter folded under my arm. He opened the door halfway, eyes flicking from me to the baked goods. "Daniel, thought you might want breakfast with your bylaws," I said. "Mind if I come in?" He hesitated just long enough to confirm my hunch. He wasn't sure whose side he was on. The living room was small and neat, with a wall of HOA binders stacked like trophies. He offered me a seat, but his fingers tapped his adipity offie mug the entire time. Not nerves, conflict. I placed the newsletter on his table and pointed. "Why your name?" "She asked me to sign off on it last minute," he said. "Said she was behind on paperwork." "She's not just behind," I said. "She used a master key to open our bathroom door while my pregnant wife was showering." Mark's hand froze mid-tap. "Ellen was inside," I said. 7 months along, no notice, no emergency, just Patricia barging in. He looked down at his mug like it might offer him an exit. She say it was ventilation-related? He asked quietly. She did. He rubbed his jaw, eyes heavy. She said the same thing at the last meeting, tried to push a motion to allow entry without notice for humidity hazard checks. I thought it sounded insane. Did it pass? Mark didn't answer right away. His thumb pressed against the rim of his mug. There was no vote, I guessed. He gave a reluctant nod. She said it was an emergency measure, board executive authority clause. Said we'd ratify it later. And you let her? His face flushed. You think it's easy going up against her? I tried once. She turned the whole board against me, said I was undermining community cohesion. Next week, I had 3 violation slips and a threat to remove me for failure to perform fiduciary duties. So you stayed quiet. He flinched, like the words stung more than he'd expected. I softened my tone. Look, I'm not here to drag you, but if you're signing your name to her policies, you're going down with her. Mark stood up, walked to the window, arms crossed. Outside, a neighbor raked leaves while a child drew chalk stars on the sidewalk. She's wrecking this place, he said quietly. People are afraid to push back. They think if they just pay the fines, she'll leave them alone. She won't, I said, because no one's ever made her pay one. That got his attention. Drop a like if you've ever seen someone turn a quiet community into a power trip playground, and subscribe to watch how we flip the game using their own rules. Mark turned from the window, something new in his posture, resolve, or maybe guilt. She's hiding things, he said, rushing through expenditures, making policy without votes, logging inspection records that never happened. You have access to the financials? He nodded slowly. Treasurer privilege. But I've never pulled them. Thought if I didn't look, I couldn't be complicit. You were wrong, I said, not unkindly, but you can still get it right. He hesitated again, but this time it wasn't fear holding him back. It was decision, the moment you feel your conscience stretch too tight and finally snap back into place. I'll get you what I can, he said, but if she finds out, she won't, and if she does, she'll regret it. I stood, offered my hand. He took it. Mark, I said, you're not the only one waking up. Outside the air was crisp. Leaves shifted in tight little spirals across the street, and inside that house, a quiet man had just stepped one toe over the line. I didn't need him to run. I just needed him to keep walking. The next morning, a bright orange notice was zip-tied to our front gate like a warning label. Final Enforcement Act. Property access required within 24 hours or daily. Fines will commence. No signature, no hearing, just bold font and fear. Ellen found it first. She stood barefoot on the porch in her robe, one hand curled over her belly, the other gripping the plastic like it might rip from sheer disbelief. She's really doing this, she murmured, after everything. She's testing how far she can push before someone pushes back harder, I said, gently taking it from her hand. The swing creaked behind us as she sat, slowly. You think she'll come again? I paused. Not alone. Inside, I photographed the notice, logged the time, printed 2 copies, one for the insurance complaint, one for the inspector's office. Then I walked 3 doors down to Mrs. Rivas's place. Her screen door opened before I knocked. It's happening to you now, too? I nodded. Same script. No vote, no warrant. She pulled out her own orange tag. We were fined yesterday, $450. They said our front step was structurally questionable. My husband's been a contractor for 20 years. I know, I said. She's not inspecting, she's retaliating. We stood there in the doorway, both of us holding plastic notices like crime scene tape. Her daughter peeked out from behind the curtain, wide-eyed and silent. She told my little girl not to play on our own porch swing last week, Mrs. Rivas whispered. Said it wasn't certified. There it was again. The swings. The spaces we held sacred. Drop a like if you've ever watched someone use power to poison the safest places in your life. And subscribe to see how this neighborhood turns the tables, together. By mid-afternoon, I counted 6 homes with matching threats. All families who'd spoken up. All quiet enough to avoid the HOA newsletter, but not quiet enough for Patricia. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was manufacturing violations as punishment. I returned home to find Ellen at the dining table, phone in hand, screen pulled up to an insurance form. Listen to this, she said. HOAs that operate without documented votes and enforce unsanctioned access policies are considered uninsurable risk groups. It voids coverage if a board member unlawfully enters private property. I leaned in. Who posted that? A risk assessor, works with Tri-Point Insurance. Look, he's got threads all over this stuff. She tapped a post where someone had asked about rogue inspections. If a board member uses a master key without resident consent, that's not just a privacy issue, it's exposure. Insurers drop associations like that without blinking. That was it. That was the angle. Not policy, not protest, liability. We've been looking at this like a power struggle, Ellen said, eyes sharp now. But we're holding the one thing they care about more than control, money. God, I love you, I whispered and kissed her forehead. We started building the file that night, Ellen collecting screenshots and testimonials from national forums, me cross-referencing state-level HOA statutes and inspected. On protocols. For every violation Patricia posted, we documented a matching lack of vote. For every policy enforcement, we found a neighbor who never saw the vote happen. We didn't need permission to expose her, we needed pressure. At 7:42 p.m., Patricia returned. She walked right up the path like she owned the soil, another tag in hand. But this time, I met her before she could reach the steps. This isn't policy anymore, I said. This is targeted harassment. She raised an eyebrow. The board has authority, not without recorded votes, not with forged timestamps, and not with an insurance policy that will cancel your entire board out of existence if I make one call tomorrow. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, calculation. She turned without another word and walked off. No speech, no threat, just distance. Ellen stepped beside me and placed her hand in mine. She knows, I said quietly. But does the rest of the board? She asked. Not yet, I said, but they will. That night, I emailed Mark. You were right. She's hiding more than just aggression. She's hiding liability. Let's drag it into the light. Mark didn't reply that night, not the next morning either. But at 9:17 a.m., just as I finished logging another 2 violation tags, one for decorative obstruction on our mailbox and another claiming unauthorized surveillance device for our ring cam, my phone buzzed. You home? Mark. Front porch. Me. He arrived 6 minutes later in a faded sweatshirt, eyes puffy, holding a manila envelope that looked like it hadn't left his hands since dawn. No copies, he said as he handed it over. You read it here, then I take it back. I nodded and opened the flap. Inside were 3 printouts. The first was a notice of insurance renewal rejection from the HOA's current carrier, Tri-Point Mutual, dated last month. The reason, repeated unauthorized entries into private residences without formal policy vote or resident consent. Coverage suspended pending policy review. The second sheet was worse, a scanned email from Patricia to the rest of the board. If Tri-Point drops us, we shift blame to Reeves. Leak a story that he's harassing the board with baseless legal threats. We'll frame it as intimidation, paint him unstable. The third was a ledger, legal fund expenses, multiple payments made to a consulting firm listed as community mediation, but the recipient address matched a private P.O. box registered under Patricia's maiden name. She's paying herself, I said. Mark nodded. It gets worse. She forged vote records. I only found out because I cross-checked meeting minutes. 2 of the supposed approvals were from sessions that never happened. Do the others know? Maybe 1 or 2, but they're either scared or complicit. I stood there with the documents fanned out on my lap, the porch swing rocking beneath me like it could feel the pressure too. Ellen stepped out just then with a glass of water and paused, instantly reading the weight on my face. This is it, isn't it? She asked. I nodded. Tri-Point's already gone. Patricia's bleeding the legal fund, and she's planning to smear me when it all collapses. Mark looked at Ellen with something like apology. I didn't know she'd go this far. She walked in on me, Ellen said steady. That's not something you miss. Drop a like if you've ever been told you're overreacting, only to find out you were underestimating the danger. And subscribe to see how this house becomes ground zero for the fight back they never saw coming. I handed the envelope back. What are you going to do? Mark We're not just going to stop her, I said. We're going to make the rest of the board choose her or their financial survival. Ellen leaned against the post beside me. The carrier may have dropped them, but we've got documentation now. Risk consultants love this kind of thing. Public exposure, patterns of misappropriation. Mark gave a low, humorless laugh. You're scarier than he is. I'm pregnant, she said. That's scarier than anything. Inside, I scanned the 3 documents, encrypting them under a time-stamped file path with 2 backups. Chain of custody mattered now, not just for law, but for optics. If Patricia tried to spin it, we'd be armed, time-stamped, and bulletproof. I also flagged the financial transfer metadata. Ellen knew a journalist from her days doing grant writing. We didn't need headlines, we just needed whispers in the right inboxes. That afternoon, I sent a formal complaint to the state's Department of Consumer Affairs, citing unauthorized entry, misuse of HOA funds, and violation of insurance disclosure law. Then, I blind copied the HOA board. At 4:26 p.m., 3 things happened almost simultaneously. 1. An email from TriPoint's legal department asking for a callback. 2. A text from Mr. Lowry. Got the same violations. Talk tonight? 3. Patricia herself walked up to our porch, lips pressed into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No more games," she said. "Your tactics are scaring the neighborhood." I rose slowly. "You're about to learn the difference between fear and accountability." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "You think some screenshots and old men with flags are enough to stop me?" I leaned closer. "No, but your treasurer is." Her eyes darted toward the window where Mark's reflection stood, visible behind the curtain. For the first time, Patricia looked cornered. "I suggest you start reading your own emails," I said, "because your board just got everything they need to bury you if they want to survive." She didn't respond. She just turned, stiff-legged, and walked down the steps like they were giving way beneath her. Inside, Ellen watched her leave. "She's panicking." "No," I said, "not yet, but by tomorrow she will be." By morning, Ellen was already dressed, a stack of printed emails in one hand and her phone in the other. Her hair was still damp, dark strands clinging to her temple, but her eyes were clear, focused. "She's holding a board meeting tonight," she said. "Last minute, emergency session." "She sent that out already?" Ellen nodded. "Blind CC'd everyone except us. Mark forwarded it." "She's going to try and bury it," I said. "Spin the narrative before the others see what we sent." "She's too late," Ellen replied, placing the stack on the table. "The damage is already done." Still, I could feel it building. The tension, the stakes, like standing on the edge of a fault line right before the ground decides it's had enough. "I'm going to talk to Mr. Lowry," I said. "He's ready." Ellen touched my arm before I stepped out. "Don't let her make you angry. That's what she's counting on." Outside, the sun hadn't burned off the early mist yet. Our porch swing rocked gently in the breeze, a faint creak under its weight, an echo of the man who built it and the peace he once promised this place. Mr. Lowry opened his door on the first knock. "Got your message," he said. "I've kept every violation notice since 2020. Filed by date, labeled by type." He led me into a side room that looked more like a courtroom than a den. Folders, receipts, date stamp. It had photos, even audio recordings from board meetings, the kind of archive only a man who's been wrong too many times would keep. "She called me non-compliant because I refused to take down my flag," he said, pulling a box from the shelf. It was a POW MIA banner, my brother's. I stared at the box. "You kept all this and never challenged her?" "I was waiting," he said, "for someone who'd swing harder than a letter to the editor." Drop a like if you've ever waited for the right moment to fight back, and subscribe if you know that time comes faster when people stand together. We photocopied the worst of it, stacked a second packet for the Consumer Affairs complaint and another for TriPoint's fraud investigation unit. By the time I got back home, Ellen had already organized the board's financial trail on a timeline that made Patricia look like she'd been laundering HOA funds into a vacation budget. "Look at this," she said, circling a figure, $4,800 marked as Community Compliance Consulting. Same week the Sandbox citation wave started. Did Mark confirm that went to her shell P.O. box? "He's printing the financial transfer history right now. He's in." I exhaled. "This has to be clean, bulletproof. If we present this wrong—" "We won't," she said, hand on her belly. "And if anything goes sideways, let me speak. She doesn't see me coming." There was something in her voice, that resolve only women get when they're not just fighting for themselves, but for the future they're carrying. And that's when I understood. Patricia hadn't just threatened my wife's dignity. She'd threatened a mother's right to feel safe in her own home. So I made the call. TriPoint's legal office confirmed receipt of our complaint. "We've been monitoring this case since last quarter," the representative said, "but we didn't have the internal financial inconsistencies until now. Does this open grounds for criminal investigation? I asked. We're escalating it. If your documentation holds up, the board could face both civil liability and referral to local law enforcement. That's when I knew. We weren't just triggering an insurance cancellation. We were putting Patricia in cuffs and giving this neighborhood its first real shot at breathing free. I hung up and turned to Ellen, who was already printing the packets for every household that had received a violation in the past 90 days. We hand-deliver them tonight, she said, before the meeting, before she can spin it. We'll need people to act fast. They will, she said, because we're not asking them to believe us. We're showing them what she's already done. That evening, the porch swing didn't creak. It stood still, silent, like even it was holding its breath. As I laced my boots and double-checked the copies, I looked back at the woman who had quietly built the strategy that would take Patricia apart, line by line, dollar by dollar. You ready? I asked. Ellen nodded. Let's finish what she started. The sun dipped low as we crossed the cul-de-sac. A dozen manila envelopes fanned in my arm like playing cards with the truth written inside. Ellen walked beside me, calm and composed, her other hand resting on the small of her back. The neighborhood didn't feel quiet tonight. It felt like it was watching. We started with the Rivas family. Mrs. Rivas opened the door before we knocked, like she'd been standing there waiting. Is this it? She whispered. Ellen nodded. It's all in there. How she used the legal fund, faked vote logs, and exposed everyone's homes to liability. Mrs. Rivas took the envelope with both hands like it might burn. We're in. Next came the Hendersons, then the Myers. Even Mr. Chaudhry, who hadn't attended a board meeting in 2 years, stepped out to shake my hand after reading the top page. By the time we got to the last house on the row, Mark Trent's, he was already on the porch. I made my decision, he said without waiting for hello. I'm done watching. He held out a new folder, bigger this time. Inside, full HOA account ledgers, vote records with gaps, emails between Patricia and a private contractor approving unapproved repairs. But what mattered most was the signature at the bottom of the summary sheet. Mark Trent, HOA Treasurer, official disclosure. She's going to know it was me, he said, eyes tired but steady. She already suspects, I told him, but now she knows you're not scared. Ellen glanced through the documents, lips pressed into a quiet line. This will do it. Drop a like if you've ever felt the moment the tide shifts, I said aloud, half to myself, half to the viewers who know how long injustice brews before it breaks. And subscribe if you're ready to see how truth, signed and sealed, brings it down. I'm coming tonight, Mark added, to the meeting. No more back rows. I'll read the disclosure out loud myself. You sure? I asked. He met my eyes. I signed it, didn't I? The three of us walked back toward my place in silence, the cool wind brushing past trimmed hedges and uniform street lamps. It was eerie how perfect everything looked, considering how rotten the foundation had become beneath it all. Ellen paused at the porch and turned. What happens if the board shuts him down? If they pretend it's fake or stall? They won't get the chance, Mark said, because I already sent a copy to every board member's inbox with red receipts. You what? I blinked. I timed the email for tonight, 6:45 p.m., he said, almost smiling. 15 minutes before Patricia's emergency session. No time to rewrite the narrative. That's brilliant, Ellen said, grinning. You finally learned to fight like she does. Better, he corrected, because I'm not hiding it. Inside, Ellen organized the rest of the household copies while I scanned Mark's documents into the secure folder for the insurance claim. The numbers matched. The dates were damning. Patricia had signed off on $13,200 worth of phantom expenditures over the last 2 quarters alone, funds marked for compliance consultation but paid to a shell entity linked directly to her second home's P.O. box. Ellen's voice was quiet but charged. She used neighborhood fines to pay for her own legal shield. She paid for a sword, I said, but we just turned it into a boomerang. The porch swing creaked as Mark sat down, envelope still in his lap. She threatened to have me removed from the board last month, he said I was undermining authority. She was right, I said. You were, and thank God. We didn't light torches or raise banners. We just waited. At exactly 6:45, the ping echoed from Mark's phone. One by one, phones buzzed across the street. Inside our house. Inside theirs. Inside Patricia's. I glanced at Ellen. You hear that? She smiled. That's the sound of a sinking ship. Mark exhaled. Guess I'm standing up tonight. You're not standing alone, I said. We'll be right behind you. He stood, brushed off his shirt, and looked toward the HOA hall down the block, where porch lights were beginning to flick on like floodlights on a stage. And this time, Mark Trent was walking into the spotlight, armed not with fear, but with truth. By 7:00 p.m., the HOA hall buzzed with the kind of tension you could feel in your chest. Folding chairs scraped concrete, neighbors whispered in low tones, heads leaned close, eyes darting toward the podium like something might combust there, and Patricia hadn't even shown up yet. Ellen stood beside me at the back, her hand curled around the curve of her stomach like a protective vow. Mark paced near the front row, clutching the signed disclosure packet like it might vanish if he let go. Is the audio set up? I asked. Ellen nodded toward her phone, discreetly clipped to the side of her purse. Recording clean, backup too. The door creaked open. Patricia walked in like a queen late to her own coronation, heels clicking, smile tight, folder clutched to her chest like a shield. But something in her eyes had shifted. She wasn't in control. She was holding on to the idea of it. Let's bring this to order, she said, ignoring the chatter. Emergency session regarding behavioral threats and disruption from resident Daniel Reeves. Point of order, Mark said, standing. Patricia froze. You'll speak when recognized. I am recognized, Mark said, voice clear. Treasurer of Cedar Glen Estates and co-signatory on this community's legal liability, and I've just submitted a formal disclosure to every board member and to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Murmurs erupted. Patricia tried to speak, but Mr. Lowry from the second row stood next. Let him talk. I have the floor, Mark said, louder now. For 2 years, this board has allowed unvoted enforcement. For 6 months, funds have been funneled into consulting companies that don't exist, tracked to a P.O. box tied to Vice President Patricia Hensley. And last week, she used a master key to enter the private BA, room of a pregnant woman without cause, notice, or consent. Every head turned. Every whisper stopped. Patricia laughed. Too loud, too forced. This is slander. Fabricated. We have vote records, Ellen cut in, stepping forward. Or rather, missing vote records. Email trails, financial transfers, Tri-Point's rejection letter, and now a neighborhood full of people who've stayed quiet for too long. Drop a like if you've ever watched the tables turn on someone who thought the rules didn't apply to them, and subscribe to see how power collapses when truth walks in the door. You're not even a board member, Patricia snapped at Ellen. I'm the woman you walked in on while I was showering, Ellen said calmly. The one who called your insurance company this morning. They've confirmed the cancellation. You no longer have liability coverage. Gasps rippled. Several board members turned toward each other, whispering furiously. This isn't a trial, Patricia barked. It's an internal matter. Not anymore, I said, stepping forward and placing a new envelope on the podium. That's the complaint filed with the local police department. Unlawful entry, criminal trespass, and your own treasurer's signature confirming misuse of funds. One of the board members, a younger man with a shaved head, stood abruptly. I moved to suspend Vice President Hensley pending investigation. I second, said another. Patricia's face twisted. You don't have the votes. You don't have insurance, Mark replied, and we're not syncing with you. She spun toward me. This is personal. You're orchestrating a smear campaign. Wrong again, I said. This is professional. I was a city inspector for 15 years. I know code, law, and risk. What you've done here isn't enforcement. It's abuse with receipts. The board voted. 5-0. Patricia was suspended. But she didn't sit down. She didn't move. Instead, she turned to leave, head high, smile fake, but her steps faltered like she'd lost the map. And for the first time since this began, she didn't have the last word. As the board reconvened in emergency executive session, Ellen sat beside me, her breath slow and even. We're not done, she whispered. I nodded. No. Now we build the replacement. Across the room, neighbors gathered, Mrs. Rivas, Mr. Lowry, the Hendersons, reading through the packets, pointing to entries, forming clusters of whispered strategy. We weren't just exposing corruption, we were rebuilding something better. And for the first time in weeks, the porch swing back home would feel like it belonged to a free house again. The morning after Patricia's suspension, the air in Cedar Glen Estates felt different, lighter, but tense, like a town just after a storm that isn't quite finished. The front walkways buzzed with quiet activity, neighbors talking in twos and threes, HOA papers in hand, glancing toward each other like they were sharing a secret they hadn't yet decided to say aloud. Ellen sat on the porch swing, laptop on her knees, her eyes sharp and focused. "We have momentum," she said without looking up. "But if we don't finish this fast, they'll bury it in red tape." "Agreed," I said, handing her the folder Mark had just dropped off. "Board member Rolston wants to cooperate. The rest are still weighing whether saving face is worth losing everything." She raised an eyebrow. So we tipped the scale. That became the theme for the next 24 hours. Tipping. We started by organizing a neighborhood review session. Not a protest, not a vote, just an open porch gathering on neutral ground. Ellen printed packets for anyone who hadn't seen the full evidence trail. Mark offered to explain the board's insurance exposure in plain English. Lowry, ever the archivist, brought violation logs and meeting audio clips. Even Mrs. Rivas showed up with lemonade and a list of intimidation events she'd documented over the past year. "This isn't a takedown anymore," Ellen said quietly as we set up folding chairs. "It's a transfer of power. Drop a like if you've ever seen a community come alive after being silenced. And subscribe if you're ready to see how neighbors can out-organize fear, one porch at a time." We held it on the Hendersons' lawn under the maple tree. 52 residents showed up. Some sat, some stood, some came late, quietly, with arms folded and walls up, but they stayed. Mark opened the gathering. "For years this board has operated like it's above you," he said, "but I signed the checks. I watched it happen, and I stayed quiet. That ends today." He didn't give a speech. He gave numbers. The dollar amount Patricia had funneled, the policy she ignored, the vote record she fabricated, the legal violations she crossed without blinking. Then Ellen stepped forward. "When she opened that bathroom door," she said, voice calm but strong, "I was in the shower, 34 weeks pregnant, vulnerable, exposed," and she didn't even pause. Silence. "I'm not just someone's wife, I'm someone's mother, and what happened to me could have happened to any of you. Or your children." She used her position to intimidate, to violate, and to profit. That's not leadership, that's trespass, and it stops here. The group didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They leaned in. They nodded. They were ready. After the meeting, we passed around a new document, a community petition to call for a full audit of the board's past 18 months of activity, a formal vote to permanently remove Patricia from the board, and an emergency election to fill vacant seats with non-board homeowners. We got 39 signatures on the spot. We needed 27. At sunset, Ellen and I returned to the porch swing, the same one where she used to read parenting books, where we once talked about baby names and garden plans. It felt different now, not like a relic but like a platform, a front line, a victory post still in motion. "Tomorrow we file the petition," I said. "Then we prep for law enforcement follow-up." "They'll come, right?" she asked. "The police?" "They will," I said. Tri-Point's report was sent to the local prosecutor's office. With the records Mark and Lowry submitted, there's a paper trail. "Good," Ellen said, then leaned her head against my shoulder, "because if she walks away from this without a single consequence, it tells everyone they can do the same." "She won't," I said. "Not this time." Our phones buzzed almost in sync. Lowry again. "Saw a moving truck outside Patricia's. Looks like she's bailing." "She thinks if she leaves, she'll dodge the heat," I said. "Then we bring it to her new doorstep," Ellen replied. That night, we finalized the packet for the prosecutor's office: trespass complaint, financial misconduct, and community testimony. The swing didn't creak this time. It stood still, steady, waiting. Because the next part wouldn't be a meeting. It would be an arrest. At 6:15 a.m., a white SUV backed into Patricia Hensley's driveway with military precision. No logo, no moving crew, just her, wearing sunglasses before sunrise, phone glued to her ear, barking instructions at someone who wasn't going to save her. "She's running," Ellen said from our bedroom window, arms crossed over her robe. "She thinks if she gets out of the neighborhood fast enough, she can stay ahead of the fallout." "She's not ahead of anything," I replied, zipping up my jacket. "The petition's filed. The police have the documents. Her address is already listed on the criminal complaint." Ellen stepped back from the window. "Then let's make sure the neighborhood sees that too." By 8 a.m., Mark, Mr. Lowry, and I had set up a small folding table outside the HOA hall. Nothing dramatic, just a clean presentation of what we'd filed. A single-page summary stapled to the front of each packet read, "Final notice. Formal charges filed against Patricia Hensley. Community update." Within the hour, over a dozen neighbors came by. Mrs. Rivas signed the attendance sheet like it was a Declaration of Independence. A group of teenagers from the corner house asked if they could live stream the scene for accountability. I nodded. Then at 9:12 a.m., two plainclothes officers rolled down the main road in a gray cruiser. Ellen squeezed my hand. "This is it." The officers walked up calmly, badges visible, not rushed. They asked for me first, verified the documents, checked the timeline, asked if Patricia was still on site. "She was here an hour ago," I said. "You've got a window." The taller officer nodded. "Where E? Executing a probable cause arrest for unlawful entry and financial misconduct under HOA code violations and state trespass statute." We didn't cheer, we didn't clap, we just watched the door across the street open, and Patricia freeze when she saw who was coming. She didn't speak as they approached, didn't argue, didn't ask why, just stood there like the moment she'd denied would ever come was finally settling on her shoulders. When they read her the charges, the neighbors stepped out onto porches, not shouting, not filming in frenzy, just watching. Mark stood beside me, expression unreadable. "This isn't what I pictured." "It's exactly what it needed to be," I said. "Quiet, direct, inevitable." Drop a like if you've ever waited for accountability to come walking down the street, and subscribe if you believe Neighbors United can do what silence never will. They cuffed her gently, respectfully, like they already knew she'd try to turn it into martyrdom, and when she was escorted into the cruiser, the real movement began. People stepped forward. "I want to be on the new board," Mr. Lowry said. "I'll help with the audit," said Mrs. Rivas. "Can we propose amendments to the bylaws?" asked a man I'd only ever seen walking his dog. "Yes," I said. "You can. You all can." By noon, the temporary board members voted to freeze all ongoing fines, reopen the budget, and schedule a full community forum. Ellen helped draft the communication strategy. No legalese, no spin, just plain language, real facts. At 2:07 p.m., the prosecutor's office confirmed formal booking of Patricia Hensley. At 3:00 p.m., I found myself back on our porch swing, knees aching, paperwork done, staring at the spot where it had all begun. One unlocked door, one pregnant woman in the shower, one man who knew how far was too far. Ellen sat beside me, her legs curled under her, hands resting on her belly like a shield and a promise. "She's gone," she whispered. "You did it." "No," I said. "We did." "And Mark?" "He's a different man now," she smiled. "So is this place." Across the cul-de-sac, I watched kids chalk the sidewalk again. No patrols, no petty fines, no orange tags fluttering on gates. Just normal, safe, quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from fear, but from peace restored. Tomorrow we'd rebuild the bylaws. Next week we'd vote in a new board. But today was for breathing again. The HOA forum wasn't supposed to feel like a town hall trial, but that's exactly what it became. It was held in the Community Rec Center, a low-slung building that had mostly hosted birthday parties and CPR classes until now. Tonight, the folding chairs were packed shoulder to shoulder. Mark adjusted the microphone at the front table, sweat glistening on his temple despite the air conditioning. The new interim president, Ms. Camille Hayes, voted in just 2 days ago, stood beside him in a crisp blue blouse, clipboard in hand, flanked by a row of stone-faced homeowners turned board members. Ellen and I stood at the back, beside Mr. Lowry and Mrs. Rivas. No one sat, not tonight. Mark tapped the mic. "This emergency community session is open, and time limits, no filters. What's said here goes into permanent record. If anyone wants to speak, line forms here." The first person to rise was Mrs. Rivas. She held her daughter's hand in one palm and the last pink violation notice in the other. "Patricia fined us for letting our daughter draw chalk stars on the sidewalk," she said into the mic, voice shaking. "Said it disrupted the neighborhood aesthetic. That was the day my daughter stopped playing outside." Gasps, murmurs, then quiet again. Mr. Lowry stepped forward next, carrying a binder full of dated notices. "I was fined for flying a POW flag for my brother," he said. "Patricia told me it was too political. She said I'd be cited again if I didn't remove it. I didn't. And the fines kept coming." The mic passed. The stories spilled out like water from a cracked dam. A young woman told how she was written up for leaving her porch light on past 11 p.m. A father described being threatened with legal action over a toy left on the lawn. A retired school teacher was cited for unregistered wind chimes. Every story ended the same way: fines, fear, silence. Then Camille stepped forward, For the record, she said, the HOA's insurer officially canceled our coverage as of last week. Our new carrier requires a formal compliance review, a new board vote, and an audit, all of which are underway. But there's one more thing to vote on tonight. She looked to Mark, who nodded and handed her a single sheet of paper. The motion to permanently ban Patricia Hensley from holding any HOA office or committee position in Cedar Glen Estates, effective immediately and indefinitely, is on the table. Residents may vote now. A hush fell over the room as neighbors stepped forward to sign the motion one by one, some with shaking hands, some with angry strokes. No one abstained. Patricia wasn't there. She was out on bail, waiting for her arraignment, but her shadow lingered in every story told, every name signed. When the last signature landed, Mark raised the clipboard and announced, "Motion passes 100%. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled. After months, years, of being watched, warned, and silenced, Cedar Glen had just taken its voice back. Camille looked toward the back. "Daniel, would you come forward?" I shook my head. This wasn't about me. Mark walked the mic to me instead. "Maybe not, but you started it. Say something." I took the mic slowly, looked out at neighbors who now looked like allies, some still scared, some still hurting, but all of them standing. "I didn't come here to fight a war," I said. "I came here to raise a family, to let my wife sleep in peace, to protect a home her father built with his own hands. What happened here wasn't about violations, it was about power. And the moment we stopped pretending it was normal, that's when everything changed." Ellen stepped beside me, her voice clear. "Thank you for listening, for speaking, and for standing with us, because no family should have to fear their own door." Being opened without permission. Drop a like if you've ever felt outnumbered until someone finally stood beside you, and subscribe if you believe neighbors can still stand up and win. As the room applauded, not wildly but with weight, I looked back at the porch swing waiting in the dark, the swing her father built, the one we'd fought to defend, not because it was cedar and nails, but because it meant safety. Home. This community had changed. And now, it was ours again. We returned home that night to a quiet cul-de-sac, the kind that used to feel too quiet, like something was being suppressed beneath the stillness. But tonight, it was different. No patrols, no eyes peeking through blinds, no notices flapping in the wind, just the soft hum of porch lights and the sound of Ellen's steps beside mine. She paused before we reached the swing and looked out across the neighborhood. "You think she's watching from somewhere, seeing all this fall apart?" "I hope so," I said, "because this isn't just punishment, it's proof." We sat down together, the porch swing creaking softly beneath us, the same one Patricia had once called non-standard, the same one Ellen's father built, where she read baby names and practiced lullabies. Now it swayed gently in the night air, victorious. Ellen leaned into me, her voice low. "You know what kept me calm that morning, after she came in?" I shook my head. "You," she said, "the way you stood at the door. You didn't yell, you didn't panic. You just stopped her, and you never stopped after that." "I wasn't protecting just you," I said. "I was protecting him too." My hand rested on her belly. "I wanted him to be born in a place that deserved him." Drop a like if you've ever had to fight for your family's dignity when no one else would. And if you believe stories like this matter, share your own in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. That weekend, Patricia's arrest made the local paper, just a small headline buried below the fold. "Former HOA official faces charges of trespass, misuse of funds." No mugshot, no quotes, just facts. That's all we needed. Camille followed up with a new community letter, open, inclusive, written in plain language, no citations, no threats, just a request for patience while the board reorganized and an invitation to join a subcommittee. Mr. Lowry volunteered for compliance reform. Mrs. Rivas drafted a new grievance process. Even the teenage live streamers created a neighborhood Discord server, no tyrants allowed. It was like watching soil recover after fire, fragile but real. On Sunday afternoon, Mark came by with a box. He placed it on the porch without a word. "What's this?" I asked. He opened the lid. Inside were all the violation tags Patricia had ever filed. Pink, orange, yellow, dozens of them. "I collected every one I could," he said. "Thought maybe we should burn them." Ellen smiled. Not yet. Let's frame one, just one, so we never forget what silence can turn into. We kept the worst one, the bathroom citation. Unauthorized denial of access, emergency entry required. We framed it in an old pine border and hung it by the front door, not as a trophy, but as a warning, by the swing. The next day I watched as a new couple moved into the corner house. No welcome patrol, no clipboard waiting on their step, just neighbors helping them unload a couch. I walked over, introduced myself, told them to let me know if they ever needed anything, especially if someone knocked claiming emergency ventilation checks. They laughed, and that felt good. Ellen called me back with a wave from the porch. I joined her again on the swing as dusk settled in. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving who was right. It was about recovery. We didn't just stop a woman with a key. We changed a system that thought no one ever would, and in doing that, we gave our son a better place to be born into. One swing, one home, one stand at a tee. Imimbo, if you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.